Captain Jake stood at the viewport of the Aurora's Promise, watching the border station grow larger against the black canvas of space. The structure was massive, easily 3 times the size of any human facility he had ever seen. Dozens of alien vessels docked at various ports, their designs ranging from sleek silver crafts to bulky cargo haulers that looked like they had been assembled from scrap metal. "We're receiving docking instructions," Commander Helen Price said from her station behind him. "They're assigning us to Bay 17. Jake nodded, his eyes still fixed on the station. This was humanity's first official contact with the Confederation, a coalition of 12 species that controlled a significant portion of this sector. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. The diplomatic team aboard his ship carried gifts, cultural databases, and enough goodwill to hopefully establish lasting relations. "Tell them we acknowledge and are following their guidance," Jake said, turning away from the viewport. "Have Dr. Grant and her team prepare for departure. I want everyone looking their best." Dr. Lisa Grant was already in the cargo bay when Jake arrived, checking the containers that held Earth's offerings to the... She looked up as he entered, a nervous smile on her face. "I've triple-checked everything," she said. "The cultural artifacts are secured, the biological samples are properly sealed, and I've memorized every greeting phrase in the trade language." "You'll do fine," Jake assured her. "Remember, we're here to listen and learn, no pressure to get everything perfect on the first day." Lisa laughed, but the sound was tight. "Easy for you to say. You just have to fly the ship. I'm the one who has to explain why humans think shaking hands is friendly when half the galaxy doesn't even have hands." Approached them, his security uniform crisp and formal. The former Marine had been with Jake for 3 years, and there was no one else the captain trusted more to watch over the delegation. "The station is broadcasting standard safety protocols," said. "Atmosphere is compatible with human biology. Gravity is 0.8 Earth standard. They're requiring all visitors to stay in designated zones until they complete orientation." "Sounds reasonable," Jake said. "Let's not give them any reason to think we're troublemakers." The Aurora's Promise settled into its assigned bay with barely a shudder. Through the airlock windows, Jake could see workers moving about the dock. They were in appearance, with 4 arms and bodies covered in chitinous plates that shimmered with green and blue hues. Their movements were quick and precise, almost mechanical in their efficiency. A delegation of 3 waited at the docking bridge. The central figure was taller than the others, its plates decorated with intricate patterns that Jake assumed indicated rank or status. "Captain," the alien said through a translation device that hung around what Jake thought might be its neck. The voice was flat and emotionless. "I am 9, administrator of this station. Welcome to space." Jake extended his hand, then remembered the briefing and lowered it. Instead, he placed his palm over his heart, the gesture of respect that Lisa's research had identified. "Administrator 9, on behalf of Earth and humanity, we thank you for receiving us. We come in peace and friendship, hoping to establish lasting relations between our peoples." Nine's head tilted slightly, an expression Jake couldn't interpret. "Your journey was long. We have prepared quarters for your delegation. Please follow." The interior of the station was impressive. Wide corridors stretched in multiple directions, with aliens of various species moving about their business. Jake saw creatures that looked like walking crystals, others that seemed to be made of liquid held together by transparent membranes, and several species whose biology easy description. But he also noticed something else. Wherever the human delegation walked, other beings moved away. Conversations stopped. Eyes, or whatever sensory organs the various species possessed, tracked their movement with what felt like suspicion. "Is it just me," Lisa whispered, "or are we getting some unfriendly looks?" "Stay close," muttered, his hand resting near the stunner at his belt. 9 led them to a large chamber that the translation device identified as a meeting hall. The walls were transparent, offering a view of the station's central hub, where hundreds of beings conducted trade and diplomacy. "You will wait here," 9 said. "The orientation process will begin shortly. Do not leave this area. The station has specific protocols for new species." Before Jake could respond, the administrator and its escorts departed, leaving the humans alone in the chamber. "Something feels wrong," Helen said quietly. She had positioned herself near the door, her military training showing. "That wasn't a friendly welcome, that was processing." Jake wanted to disagree, but his instincts echoed Helen's concern. They had been polite but cold, efficient but distant. There had been no curiosity, no questions about Earth or human culture, just instructions and boundaries. "Let's give them the benefit of the doubt," he said, though doubt was exactly what he felt. Different cultures have different approaches to first contact. Maybe they're just cautious. Hours passed. The humans waited, growing increasingly restless. Lisa attempted to access the station's information network, but found that their credentials hadn't been activated. Noted that the door, while not locked, was being monitored by security cameras that tracked every movement. When 9 finally returned, it was accompanied by a dozen guards carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "There has been a complication," the administrator said, its translated voice still devoid of emotion. "Your presence on this station requires additional evaluation. You will be relocated to a secure area while the Confederation Council reviews your status." "What kind of complication?" Jake demanded, stepping forward. "We followed every protocol you provided. We came here in good faith." "Your biology presents concerns," 9 replied. "Initial scans indicate that your species carries microbial diversity that exceeds safe parameters. You are from what we classify as a contaminated world. This requires quarantine procedures." "Contaminated?" Lisa's voice rose in anger. "Earth has a diverse biosphere, but we're not diseased. We can provide complete medical records prove that we're no threat to anyone here." "The decision has been made," 9 said. "Please cooperate with relocation. Resistance will be met with force." Jake looked at his team, had his hand on his weapon, but they were outnumbered and in hostile territory. Helen's face was pale but determined. Lisa looked like she wanted to argue further. "We'll cooperate," Jake said, hatting every word. "But I'm filing a formal protest. This violates every diplomatic standard we agreed to before coming here." The guards surrounded them, and the delegation was marched through the station's corridors. Other aliens watched them pass, and Jake saw something in their various expressions that chilled him. Not curiosity or concern, but disgust. They were being looked at like contaminants, like something unclean that needed to be removed. They were taken to a cargo bay deep in the station's lower levels. The chamber was bare metal, with no furniture or amenities. As the guards herded them inside, Jake turned to 9. "How long will this evaluation take?" he asked. The administrator's head tilted again. "As long as necessary." The door sealed behind them with a sound that echoed like a coffin closing. Through a small viewport, Jake watched the guards take positions outside. One of them was installing additional equipment near the door, devices whose purpose he couldn't identify. "Jake," said, his voice low and urgent, "look at the environmental controls." Jake followed his gaze and felt his blood run cold. The atmosphere regulators were being modified, and through the viewport, he could see technicians connecting what looked like purge systems to their chamber. "They're not evaluating us," Helen whispered, realization and horror mixing in her voice. "They're preparing to eliminate us." Jake pounded on the sealed door, his fists making dull thuds against the metal that no one outside would hear or care about. Behind him was frantically working on the chamber's control panel, trying to access any system that might give them options. "The communication array is locked down," reported, his voice steady despite the situation. "I can receive station broadcasts, but we can't send anything out. They've isolated us completely." Lisa had her portable scanner out, running it along the walls and ceiling. Her hands shook, but she kept working, her scientific mind refusing to shut down even in the face of death. "The atmospheric composition is still normal," she said. "But those external systems they're installing, they're designed for rapid decompression. Jake, they're going to vent this entire chamber into space." Helen stood at the viewport, watching the technicians work with calm efficiency. "They've done this before," she said quietly. "Look how practiced they are. This isn't a new procedure for them." Jake forced himself to think past the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. His daughter was back on Earth, waiting for him to return with stories of peaceful aliens and new frontiers. His crew trusted him to keep them safe. He couldn't let it end like this, trapped like animals waiting for slaughter. "Can you access any of the station broadcasts?" Jake asked. "Anything that might tell us why they're doing this?" Adjusted the control panel, and suddenly voices filled the chamber. The translation software struggled to keep up, but fragments came through clearly enough. Contamination risk level assessed at critical. Biological diversity exceeds acceptable parameters by factor of 47. Earth classification confirmed as Type 9 Death World. Species shows adaptation to extreme environmental variables. Council authorization received for cleansing protocol. No appeals permitted for Type 9 classifications. Lisa sank to the floor, her scanner falling from her hands. "They're killing us because Earth is too harsh," she whispered. "Because we evolved to survive on a planet they consider dangerous. They think we're contaminated just by existing." "That's insane," Helen said, but her voice lacked conviction. They had all studied enough galactic sociology to know that many alien species operated on principles humans found incomprehensible. Jake sat down beside Lisa, his mind racing through every negotiation tactic he had ever learned. But what could he negotiate with? They had no leverage, no allies, no way to even communicate their situation to anyone who might help. "My daughter's name is Sophie," Jake said suddenly. "She's 8 years old. She made me promise to bring her back a picture of an alien, something she could show her class at school." "I have a brother," added. "He's serving on the defense station near Mars. We promised each other we'd both make it to retirement before either of us did anything stupid." Helen pulled out a small data pad from her pocket. "I've been keeping a log," she said. "Everything we've seen, everything we've learned. I was going to turn it into a report when we got back, help future delegations avoid our mistakes." Lisa looked up at them, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to understand them," she said. "I spent years learning about alien cultures, studying their languages, trying to find common ground, and they're going to kill us without even trying to understand us first." The chamber suddenly shuddered, and alarm klaxons began blaring outside. Through the viewport, they saw personnel running past, their movements even more frantic than before. "Something's happening," said, pressing his face against the viewport. "Some kind of station-wide alert." But the technicians working on their chamber didn't stop. If anything, they accelerated their work, as if trying to finish before whatever crisis was unfolding could interfere. Jake stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the station beyond. He could see other alien species being evacuated from nearby sections. Ships were departing from docking bays in a steady stream. Whatever was happening, the station was clearing out. "They're evacuating everyone else," Helen observed, joining him at the viewport. "But not us." The realization hit them all at once. The station alert wasn't going to save them. It was the reason for the urgency. They wanted them dead before anyone else could intervene or question what was happening. 9 appeared outside the viewport, its expression unreadable behind its features. It made a gesture to the technicians, who stepped back from their work. The administrator approached a control panel mounted on the wall near the chamber door. "Captain," 9's voice came through the chamber's speakers. "Your presence in space has been deemed incompatible with Confederation safety standards. The Council has authorized immediate termination of your delegation under biological hazard protocols." "We're not a hazard," Jake shouted at the viewport. "Give us a chance to prove it. Quarantine us, study us, do whatever tests you need, but don't do this." "Your species evolved on a death world," 9 replied, its tone suggesting it was explaining something obvious to a child. "Your microbial diversity, your adaptive biology, your psychological tolerance for chaos and danger, all of these factors make you fundamentally incompatible with civilized space. You cannot change what you are." "Then why invite us here?" Lisa demanded, pushing forward to the viewport. "Why go through the pretense of diplomatic contact if you always plan to kill us?" 9 tilted its head. "The invitation was a mistake. The junior administrator who approved your visit has been disciplined. Protocols exist for a reason. Species from death worlds must be contained before they can spread their contamination." The administrator's hand moved toward the control panel. Grabbed Jake's shoulder. "The black box," he said urgently. "The Aurora's promise has an automated recording system. Everything that's happened here, every conversation, it's all being transmitted back to Earth on a delayed relay." Jake felt a strange mixture of despair and satisfaction. They were going to die, but Earth would know the truth. Humanity would understand that they hadn't failed through incompetence or error. They had been murdered for the crime of being born on a world the galaxy considered too dangerous. "Earth will come for you," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the speaker system. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but humans don't forget they're dead, and we don't forgive those who kill us in cold blood. 9 made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Earth is primitive. Your species has barely achieved faster-than-light travel. The Confederation has existed for 12,000 years. We have nothing to fear from you. The administrator pressed a control on the panel. Alarms shrieked inside the chamber. Red lights began flashing along the walls. Jake heard the atmosphere pumps change pitch, and suddenly the air was rushing past him, flowing toward vents that had opened in the ceiling. Lisa grabbed Helen's hand, braced himself against the wall. Jake stood at the viewport, his eyes locked on 9, memorizing every detail of the being who had ordered their execution. The pressure dropped rapidly. Jake's ears popped, then started bleeding. His lungs burned as they struggled to extract oxygen from air that was quickly disappearing. He could see his breath now, the moisture freezing instantly in the rapidly cooling chamber. Helen collapsed first, her body shutting down as the oxygen deprivation overwhelmed her. Tried to reach her but fell to his knees, his strength failing. Lisa was still standing, still defiant, her eyes blazing with fury even as her face turned blue. Jake's vision narrowed to a tunnel. His last thought was of Sophie, waiting at home for a father who would never return. He hoped she would understand. He hoped Earth would make them understand what they had done. The chamber's atmosphere reached zero. The humans stopped moving, their bodies floating slightly in the microgravity created by the vacuum. Through the viewport, 9 watched for several minutes, ensuring the termination was complete. Disposal team to Cargo Bay 17, the administrator said into its communicator. Cleansing protocol complete. Prepare the vessels for sterilization and destruction. Remove all evidence of human presence from station records. The technicians returned and began disconnecting their equipment. Within an hour, the chamber was restored to standard configuration. The human bodies were loaded into disposal containers and jettisoned into the nearest star. The Aurora's promise was gutted, sterilized, and then deliberately destroyed through controlled detonation. 9 filed a report with the Confederation Council, noting that a potential contamination event had been successfully contained. The administrator recommended updating protocols to automatically screen all contact requests from Death World species. The Council approved the recommendations and commended 9 for its decisive action. The matter was considered closed. None of them knew about the black box transmission that had been sending a steady stream of data back toward Earth for the past 6 days. None of them understood that every moment of the massacre had been recorded, compressed, and broadcast across the quantum relay network that connected human vessels to there. None of them realized that halfway across the galaxy, Earth had received the transmission 3 hours ago and was already preparing its response. The Global Defense Council chamber was built deep beneath Geneva, designed to withstand everything from nuclear strikes to asteroid impacts. Today, it held 53 people representing every nation on Earth, and the silence in the room was absolute. President Cross stood at the central podium, her hands gripping its edges as she watched the recording play for the 3rd time. On the massive screen that dominated the far wall, Jake pleaded for his life while 9 explained why humans were too contaminated to exist. Then came the sounds of the atmosphere venting, the desperate gasps, the final moments. When the recording ended, looked out at the assembled leaders. She saw rage on some faces, tears on others, but most wore expressions of cold calculation. They were leaders of a species that had clawed its way up from caves to spaceships. They knew how to turn grief into action. The transmission was 3 hours ago, Admiral Richard Hayes said from his position near the tactical displays. Our cryptography teams confirmed its authenticity. The Aurora's promised black box sent continuous updates for 6 days before going silent. Everything we just watched actually happened. How many people know? Asked Minister from the Chinese delegation. Currently, this council and the encryption teams replied. We've kept it contained until we decide on a unified response, but we can't keep it secret forever. The families are asking questions. The media knows something is wrong. Let me make sure I understand, said Chancellor from Germany, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Our people traveled in peace. They followed every protocol, and the murdered them because Earth's environment is too harsh, because we're adapted to survive on our own planet. That's the core of it, said Dr. Earth's foremost expert on alien psychology. He stood near the screen looking exhausted. The Confederation operates on a biological hierarchy. Species from stable, gentle worlds rank higher. Species from harsh environments are considered contaminated, dangerous. Earth, with its extreme weather, tectonic activity, and competitive evolution, rates as what they call a Type 9 death world. So this could happen again, General Martinez said. Anytime humans encounter species that think like we're at risk of being exterminated on sight. The galactic community has established protocols, Doctor continued. Death world species are supposed to be quarantined, studied from a distance, and only contacted under controlled conditions. They violated their own procedures by accepting our diplomatic mission. But once they realized their mistake, they defaulted to elimination rather than risk what they perceive as contamination. Let the discussion continue for several minutes, watching as the council members processed what they had learned. Finally, she raised her hand for silence. We have 3 options, she said. First, we take this matter to the Galactic Assembly, present the evidence and demand justice through established diplomatic channels. They'll dismiss it, Doctor interrupted. The Assembly operates on the same biological hierarchy. We're newcomers from a death world. They are an established member with 12,000 years of standing. At best, we'll get a formal apology and assurances that it won't happen again. At worst, they'll side with thee and declare humans too dangerous for general contact. Second option, continued, we do nothing. We accept that space is hostile, withdraw from exploration, and focus on defending our own system. That's surrender, Admiral Hayes said flatly. It tells every species out there that humans can be killed without consequence. Nodded, which brings us to option 3. We respond with force. We make an example of the Confederation that will be remembered across the galaxy. The room erupted in debate. Some council members argued for restraint, citing humanity's relative weakness compared to established galactic powers. Others demanded immediate military action. The arguments grew heated, voices rising as the weight of the decision pressed down on everyone present. Enough, said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Admiral Hayes, present your assessment. The Admiral activated the tactical display, and the room's attention shifted to the holographic projection that appeared above the conference table. It showed the local sector of space, with Earth marked in blue and territory highlighted in red. For the past 8 years, we've been reverse engineering alien technology salvaged from various sources, Hayes explained. The galactic community believes we're primitive because that's what we've let them believe. In reality, we've made significant advances in propulsion, weapons systems, and defensive capabilities. New icons appeared on the display, representing human ships positioned throughout the outer solar system. This is the Earth Defense Fleet, Hayes continued. 12 capital ships, 40 destroyers, and over 200 support vessels, all equipped with technology that no galactic species has seen before because we developed it in isolation. That can fire projectiles at .2 light speed, nuclear pulse weapons, electronic warfare systems designed to exploit standard galactic network protocols. You're talking about going to war with an interstellar power that's existed longer than human civilization, Minister said carefully. Even with advantages in technology, we're talking about one solar system against a confederation of 12 species spread across dozens of star systems. We're not going to war with the entire confederation, Hayes replied. We're executing a precision strike against those directly responsible for the massacre. We destroy their military capability, extract the individuals who ordered our people killed, and make it clear that humanity will not tolerate this kind of treatment. What about the galactic response? Asked Ambassador from the African Union. Even if we succeed militarily, we'll be pariahs. No trade, no alliances, complete isolation. Doctor stepped forward. We're already pariahs, he said quietly. The moment they classified us as a death world species, we were never going to be accepted as equals. The choice isn't between isolation and integration. It's between being victims or being a power they have to respect. Looked around the room, reading the faces of the council members. She could see the calculation happening behind their eyes, weighing the risks against the costs of inaction. I need a decision, she said. We can debate philosophy later. Right now, I need to know if Earth is willing to back up its demand for justice with force. The vote took 20 minutes. When it concluded, 47 council members had voted for military action. 6 had abstained. None had voted against. Felt the weight of what they were about to do settle on her shoulders. Humanity was about to announce itself to the galaxy not as hopeful explorers, but as a species willing to fight for its dignity. "Admiral Hayes, you have authorization to deploy the fleet," she said. "Target is prime. Your objective is to extract those responsible for the massacre and demonstrate that human lives have value. Minimize civilian casualties, but make the cost of attacking humanity absolutely clear." "Understood, Madam President," Hayes replied. "Doctor, prepare a message for galactic broadcast. Every species needs to hear what we're about to say." 6 hours later, every communication channel in known space carried the same transmission. President Cross appeared on screens across thousands of worlds, her expression calm but unyielding. "To the Confederation and all species who received this message, I am Cross, President of Earth. 6 days ago, the murdered 37 human diplomats in cold blood. They were executed not for any crime, but because they considered them contaminated by virtue of being human." The recording from the Aurora's Promise began playing, showing the final moments of Jake and his crew. Let it run for 2 minutes before continuing. "We have given the Confederation 7 days to surrender those responsible and open their decision-making records to independent review. If they fail to comply, Earth will extract justice by force. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification." The message ended, and the galaxy reacted. Most species dismissed it as the desperate posturing of a primitive race. The Council issued a statement denying the accusations and calling humanity's claims fabricated. They mobilized their defense fleet, confident that their superior numbers and established technology would deter any human action. But in the outer solar system, 12 massive warships began their journey toward space. They moved faster than any alien vessel had observed, powered by drives that bent the fabric of space in ways galactic science considered impossible. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiant Light, the flagship of humanity's fleet. Around him, crew members worked with quiet efficiency, preparing weapons systems and running final diagnostics. "Time to space?" Hayes asked. 6 days at current speed," his navigator replied. "Good," Hayes said, looking at the tactical display that showed the human fleet in formation. "That gives them 1 day to make the right choice. After that, we show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humans." Behind him, the communication officer spoke up. "Sir, we're receiving messages from multiple galactic sources. The collective is warning to take our threats seriously. Several independent traders are evacuating from territory, and the Galactic Assembly has called an emergency session." "Note it all in the log," Hayes said. "But it doesn't change our mission. Jake and his crew deserve justice. We're going to get it for them." The fleet accelerated, and Earth held its breath, waiting to see if the galaxy would learn its lesson the easy way or the hard way. The Confederation Council Chamber was designed to inspire awe. Walls of crystallized energy displayed the achievements of 12,000 years of civilization. Representatives from 12 species sat in carefully arranged tiers, each position reflecting their status in the biological hierarchy. Today, the chamber was filled with chaos. "The human fleet will arrive in 8 hours, Defense Coordinator Vex-12 reported, its voice carrying an edge of panic that was highly unusual for communication standards. Long-range sensors confirmed 12 capital vessels, 40 smaller warships, and over 100 support craft. They are moving at speeds our projections indicated were impossible for their technology level." "Impossible or not, they are coming," Elder 9 said from its position at the central podium. Since the human broadcast, the administrator had been recalled to explain its actions. "This council authorized the cleansing protocol. The humans were contaminated. We followed established procedures." "You followed procedures for a species that couldn't fight back," Council Prime 1 snapped. "Now we face a military crisis because you were too arrogant to verify their actual capabilities before acting." The chamber erupted in argument. Some council members defended 9's actions, citing the contamination risk and biological protocols. Others condemned the decision as reckless, pointing out that humans had provided extensive documentation of their peaceful intentions. "Enough debate," Vex-12 interrupted. "We need to decide on a military response. The defense fleet is assembled and awaiting orders. 60 warships against their 12. We have numerical superiority. Deploy them, Council Prime ordered. Establish a defensive perimeter around Prime. If the humans want war, we will demonstrate why the Confederation has endured for. 8 light towers away, Admiral Richard Hayes watched the tactical display on the bridge of the Defiant Light. The fleet was forming up exactly where his analysts had predicted, using standard defensive formations that hadn't changed in centuries. "They're predictable," Captain Ward said from her position aboard the destroyer Relentless, her voice coming through the fleet communication channel. "Plasma weapon platforms, particle shields, and command and control networks that rely on centralized coordination. We've trained against these systems for years." "Don't get overconfident," Hayes warned. "They have more ships and more experience. We win through superior tactics and weapons they've never encountered." Lieutenant Park, the tactical officer aboard the Defiant Light, highlighted several points on the display. "Their formation leaves gaps here and here. If we deploy the drone swarms first, we can overwhelm their targeting systems before the main engagement." Hayes studied the plan, then nodded. "Make it happen. All ships prepare for combat operations. Remember the mission parameters, disable their military capability, and extract the individuals responsible for the massacre. We're not here to conquer. We're here to deliver justice." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Immediately, thousands of small drones launched from the support vessels, spreading out in a pattern that looked random but was actually carefully coordinated. "Human vessels, you are in violation of space," the transmission came from the defense fleet. "Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Hayes opened a channel. "This is Admiral Richard Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here to extract those responsible for the murder of 37 human diplomats. Surrender them peacefully, or we will take them by force. Your demands are unacceptable. All vessels engage." The fleet opened fire, plasma weapons lighting up the space between the two forces. But the human ships were already moving, their electronic warfare systems jamming the targeting networks and causing confusion in their formation. The drone swarms hit first. Each drone carried a simple kinetic payload, but they moved fast enough that impact was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, were largely ineffective against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. 3 cruisers exploded in the first 30 seconds of engagement. The drones punched through their shields and hulls, causing catastrophic failures in power systems and life support. "Reform the line," Vex 12 ordered frantically. "Concentrate fire on the lead human vessels." The fleet tried to adapt, but the humans weren't fighting the way any galactic military had fought before. Instead of trading fire at range, the human destroyers accelerated directly into the formation, their shields absorbing plasma fire while they closed to point-blank range. Captain Ward felt her ship shudder as weapons hammered against the relentless shields. Damage reports flowed across her console, but she ignored them, focusing on the mission. "Batteries fire," she ordered. The Relentless shuddered again, this time from the recoil of its main weapons. Solid tungsten projectiles, each weighing several tons and accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, streaked across the void. They tore through 3 destroyers like they were made of paper. "Taking heavy damage," her engineer reported. "Forward shields at 40%, hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. "Maintain position," replied. "We hold this line." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships took damage that should have forced them to retreat, but they didn't. They pressed forward, accepting losses to get close enough for their weapons to be devastatingly effective. Lieutenant Park coordinated the assault from the Defiant Light, tracking every ship and identifying priority targets. "Admiral, the command ship is attempting to withdraw. If we let it escape, they can coordinate reinforcements." "Captain Ward, can you intercept?" Hayes asked. Checked her tactical display. The Relentless was badly damaged, systems failing across multiple decks, but the command ship was within range. "Affirmative," she said, "but I won't be able to disengage afterward. This ship is done." "Noted," Hayes replied. "Make it count." The Relentless turned toward the fleeing command ship, pushing its damaged engines to maximum. Escorts tried to block her path, but rammed through them, using her ship as a battering ram. Metal screamed and hulls buckled, but the destroyer kept moving. Locked, her weapons officer reported. Fire everything, ordered. The Relentless unleashed every weapon it had left. Missiles, energy weapons, even the point defense systems. The barrage caught the command ship broadside, overwhelming its shields and tearing into its hull. The command ship broke apart, its death throwing the remaining fleet into confusion. Without central coordination, their formation fell apart, individual ships making independent decisions about whether to fight or flee. Human fleet, this is Vex 12, a transmission came through. We request ceasefire, we will discuss terms. No terms, Hayes replied coldly. Surrender completely or we continue the engagement. It took 8 hours to finish. Some ships surrendered immediately, others fought until they were disabled or destroyed. By the time the battle ended, the defense fleet was reduced to scattered wreckage and a handful of captured vessels. The human fleet had paid a price. The Relentless was gone, along with 6 other destroyers. Hundreds of crew members had died in the fighting, but they had achieved their objective. Prime was defenseless. Hayes positioned his remaining ships in orbit around the planet, their weapons trained on military installations and government facilities. He opened a channel to the surface, broadcasting to the entire planet. This is Admiral Richard Hayes. The defense fleet has been neutralized. You have 12 hours to surrender those responsible for the murder of human diplomats. After 12 hours, we will begin destroying your military infrastructure. After 24 hours, we will begin dismantling your government facilities. We will continue until our demands are met or until you have nothing left. On the surface, the Confederation Council watched the human ships in orbit and understood that they had catastrophically miscalculated. These weren't primitives making empty threats. These were predators from a death world, and they had proven they meant every word they said. Council Prime 1 looked at 9 with cold fury. You did this, it said. You brought this disaster upon us. I followed procedure, 9 protested. You followed arrogance, 1 replied, and now you will face the consequences. 10 hours later, a small transport launched from the surface, transmitting surrender codes. Aboard were 9 and 6 other officials who had directly authorized the massacre. As the transport approached the human fleet, its passengers understood that their 12,000-year-old civilization had just learned a hard lesson about underestimating species from death worlds. Admiral Hayes watched the transport dock with the defiant light, then turned to his communication officer. Send a message to Earth. Mission accomplished. Justice delivered. But even as he spoke, new alerts appeared on his tactical display. The Galactic Assembly had issued an emergency summons. Humanity was being called to answer for its actions, and Hayes knew the real challenge was just beginning. The Galactic Assembly chamber was built to accommodate thousands of beings from dozens of species. Today, it held representatives from 47 civilizations, all gathered to confront the species to make itself known through violence rather than diplomacy. President Cross stood at the central platform, flanked by Admiral Richard Hayes and Dr. Around them, alien beings of every description watched with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. The air itself seemed charged with tension, various atmospheres mixing in the carefully controlled environment. At the high bench, Elder presided. The crystalline being's form refracted light in patterns that others could read as emotional states. Currently, those patterns suggested deep displeasure. The Assembly recognizes Earth and its representatives, said, its voice resonating through translation devices. You stand accused of violating 43 separate galactic laws regarding warfare, proportional response, and diplomatic protocol. How do you answer these charges? We don't, replied simply. We're not here to defend ourselves according to your laws. We're here to explain the new reality you need to understand. The chamber erupted in protests. Representatives from various species shouted objections, demanding respect for Assembly authority, raised several of its crystalline appendages, calling for order. You stand in this chamber by our allowance, said. If you will not recognize our authority, why should we hear you at all? Because what happened to the Confederation can happen to any species that threatens human life, said calmly. You can hear us now, or you can learn the hard way. Your choice. Admiral Hayes activated a holographic display, and the chamber fell silent as they watched the recording from the Aurora's promise. Every moment of the massacre played out in perfect clarity, Jake pleading for his crew's lives, 9 explaining why humans were too contaminated to exist, the atmosphere venting, the final desperate moments. When it ended, spoke into the silence. 37 humans traveled in peace to space. They followed every protocol. They carried gifts and goodwill. And they were murdered because your civilization decided that species from harsh worlds don't deserve to live. The actions were regrettable, a representative from the Dominion said, its tentacles writhing in what might have been discomfort. But your response was disproportionate. You destroyed an entire defense fleet. You bombarded military installations. You have killed thousands. We gave them 7 days to surrender those responsible, Hayes said. They chose to fight instead. Every death in that battle is on them, not us. You cannot simply declare yourselves exempt from galactic law, said. Civilization requires order. If every species responded to grievances with military force, there would be no peace. There was no peace for Jake and his crew, Doctor interjected. There was no order that protected them. Your civilization allowed them to be murdered because they came from a death world. So don't lecture us about order when your order includes genocide based on planetary classification. The biological hierarchy exists for a reason, a representative said from the back of the chamber. It was not Nine, who is currently imprisoned aboard a human vessel. Death world species are unpredictable, dangerous. Contamination risks must be managed. Felt her anger rise but kept her voice steady. Managed. That's a pleasant word for murder. How many other species have been managed by your precious hierarchy? How many civilizations were exterminated before they could defend themselves? The silence that followed was answer enough. Could see it in the way some representatives shifted uncomfortably, in the patterns of light that played across Elder's crystalline form. You prove our point, another representative said. Your aggression, your willingness to use force, these are exactly the traits that make Death World species dangerous. Then let me be clear about something, said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Earth will no longer seek acceptance into your hierarchy. We will no longer prove ourselves worthy by your standards. We will not beg for a place in your civilization. From this moment forward, any species that harms humans will face consequences, regardless of what your assemblies decide. You cannot simply declare independence from galactic authority, said. Watch us, replied. You may continue your civilization as you see fit, but understand that civilization as you practice it ends where human interests begin. We are not your subordinates. We are not your victims. We are the line you will not cross. This is anarchy, the representative protested. If we allow one species to operate outside the framework, the entire system collapses. Your system already collapsed, Doctor said. It collapsed the moment you allowed murder to be justified by biological classification. Earth is simply refusing to participate in that system. Elder's form pulsed with colors that the translation software interpreted as frustration and concern. The assembly offers a compromise. Earth withdraws its forces from space. The individuals responsible for the massacre are tried by a neutral assembly tribunal. Both sides submit to binding arbitration regarding future contact protocols. No, said flatly. The officials are already in our custody. They will be tried on Earth by human courts for crimes against humanity. As for contact protocols, any species that approaches Earth peacefully will be received peacefully. Any species that threatens us will be destroyed. It's very simple. You are condemning your species to isolation, warned. No trade, no alliances, no access to established space lanes. Is your pride worth that cost? It's not pride, Admiral Hayes said quietly. It's dignity. Jake and his crew deserve justice. Every human who travels into space deserves to know that Earth will protect them. If that means isolation, then we'll accept it. The assembly debated for hours. Some species called for sanctions against Earth. Others demanded military intervention. But notably, none of them actually threatened force. The destruction of the fleet had made Earth's capabilities clear, and no one wanted to be the next example. As the debate wore on, noticed something interesting. Several species representatives were watching the proceedings with expressions that suggested they were reconsidering their positions. The collective, the independent traders, even some member species of larger confederations who had always been on the lower tiers of the biological hierarchy. Finally, Elder called for a vote on formal sanctions against Earth. The result was split almost evenly, with no clear consensus. The assembly was fracturing, unable to agree on how to handle a species that simply refused to participate in their established order. "This session is adjourned," declared. "The matter remains unresolved." As the various delegations began departing, several representatives approached the human delegation privately. The collective ambassador extended what recognized as a gesture of respect. "My people have observed Earth for some time," the said, its aquatic suit containing a being that looked like a cross between a squid and a dolphin. "We appreciate your position. The biological hierarchy has never served those of us from non-standard environments well. Perhaps there could be mutual benefit in a more direct relationship." Others followed with similar offers: trade agreements, information sharing, mutual defense pacts, all offered outside the structure of the assembly and its hierarchies. On the journey back to Earth, stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel, watching the stars stream past. Admiral Hayes joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked. Hayes considered the question. "We did the only thing we could do. The galaxy operates on rules that would never protect us. We had to establish that human lives have value, even if it means standing alone." "We're not alone anymore," Doctor said, entering the observation deck with a data pad. "I've been analyzing the diplomatic contacts we made after the assembly session. At least 12 species are interested in formal relations with Earth. Outside the assembly structure, they're calling it the Independent Coalition." Smiled slightly. "We came to the galaxy looking for friends and found a hierarchy that considered us contaminated. So we broke their hierarchy and found allies among the other outcasts." "The trial starts next week," Hayes said. "Earth News wants to broadcast it across all known space, show the galaxy what human justice looks like." "Make it happen," said. "Let them see that we can be harsh, but we're not monsters. We gave them trials, lawyers, fair process, more than they gave Jake and his crew." 3 months later, the 7 officials were convicted by a human jury and sentenced to life imprisonment. The trial was indeed broadcast across the galaxy, and reactions were mixed. Some species condemned it as victor's justice. Others were surprised by the fairness of the proceedings, the evidence presented, the opportunity for defense. The Confederation, humbled by military defeat and divided by internal disputes over responsibility for the disaster, signed a formal peace treaty with Earth. They paid reparations to the families of the massacre victims and agreed to establish formal diplomatic relations based on mutual respect rather than biological hierarchy. Admiral Hayes visited the memorial that had been built on Earth for the 37 victims. Their names were carved in black granite, along with the words, "They came in peace. They will not be forgotten." Lisa Grant's younger sister was there, now wearing the uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. She had applied the day after the trial ended, determined to continue her sister's work of reaching out to other species. "Do you think things will get better with the galaxy?" she asked Hayes. "Better is relative," Hayes replied. "We'll never be part of their hierarchy and they'll never fully trust us. But they know now that humanity won't be victimized. That's not friendship, but it's something." "What about the Independent Coalition?" she asked. The others who want to work with us." Hayes smiled. "That's where the real opportunity is. Species who were also marginalized by the biological hierarchy. We're building something new with them, not based on who evolved on the prettiest planet, but on mutual respect and shared interests." Across the galaxy, humanity's exploration vessels continued their missions, but now they traveled with armed escorts. The message was clear. Humans still sought peaceful contact, still hoped to learn and share knowledge, but they would never again be victims. On the diplomatic station that Earth had built in neutral space, species from across the galaxy met to negotiate trade and exchange information outside the assembly structure. The biological hierarchy still existed, but it no longer controlled everything. There were alternatives now, and Earth stood at the center of them. President Cross addressed the Earth Congress, marking the anniversary of the massacre. Jake and his crew went to the stars hopping to make friends. They found prejudice and murder instead. But their deaths were not in vain. They showed us that the galaxy as it exists is not worthy of blind acceptance. So we changed it, not with words or appeals, but with the simple declaration that human lives matter and we will defend them at any cost. She paused, looking out at the representatives who had gathered from across Earth. "We did not choose isolation. We chose dignity. And in choosing dignity, we found that we were not alone. Other species, also tired of being judged by arbitrary standards, have joined us. Together, we are building something better than the civilization that rejected us. The galaxy will continue to view us as dangerous, as unpredictable death who don't respect their ancient order. And you know what? They're right. We are dangerous. We are unpredictable. We refuse to accept that our worth is determined by how gentle our was, and that makes us a threat to everything they've built their hierarchy upon. But we also remain open to those who approach us with genuine respect. We trade with we share technology with the independent traders. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. This is who we are, not conquerors seeking empire, not isolationists hiding from the galaxy, but a species that demands the same respect we give to others. The speech was broadcast across human space and picked up by monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Some species dismissed it as continued posturing from primitives who had gotten lucky. Others began to reconsider their positions, wondering if perhaps the humans had a point about the arbitrary nature of biological hierarchies. On the new Council Prime watched the broadcast and reflected on the cost of underestimating a death world species. The Confederation would survive, but it would never again hold the same position in galactic politics. They had learned their lesson, though the price had been devastating. In the prison where Nine was held, the former administrator also watched. It understood now that the cleansing protocol had been based on a fundamental miscalculation. Humans were dangerous, but not because of their biology or their harsh world. They were dangerous because they refused to accept injustice, even when doing so would have been easier and safer. The galaxy was learning to live with this new reality. Civilization, as they had practiced it for thousands of years, had indeed ended at Earth's borders. What would emerge in its place remained to be seen, but humanity had made certain that it would be built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than arbitrary hierarchy. And somewhere in deep space, a human exploration vessel made contact with a species that had never heard of the Massacre or Earth's reputation. The encounter began peacefully, with genuine curiosity on both sides. Behind the exploration ship, an armed escort watched carefully, ready to ensure that this story ended differently than Jake's had. The age of humanity's innocence was over. The age of humanity's strength had begun.